Welcome everyone, Mr. Marvin here. So this is the recording of the rest of our story that we started yesterday. Yesterday we read the very first paragraph and we talked about how our narrator, Montresor, he is telling this story to us. And additionally, we found out that he is this revenge upon his friend Fortunato because Fortunato at some point insulted him. Now, Montresor wants to get away with his revenge, but he also wants Fortunato to know that it's him. So, okay, so that's pretty typical revenge. But here's the thing to remember about Montresor. Did he ever tell Fortunato about Fortunato's insult? Did he ever tell Fortunato that, oh, you hurt my feelings, you insulted me, that hurt me? No, he did not. So what does that tell us about the narrator's character? Well, it suggests that the narrator is sneaky. He's hypocritical. He's a little psychopathic. It's like our narrator was looking for some excuse to kill someone. And so when Fortunato finally insults him, I say insulted because we don't actually know what the insult is. Maybe Fortunato didn't even insult him and the narrator is just making up an excuse. So again, he could be a psychopath. So once he insults our narrator, then the narrator, he doesn't do anything. He doesn't fix any problems. He doesn't try to resolve the issues. He just goes from, you're my friend. Oh, you insulted me. Now I'm going to kill you. So he's kind of a weird dude. And he's still acting friendly towards Fortunato as well. So our narrator, not the best guy, a bit of a psychopath, a little bit insane, but that kind of goes for the par, or that's par for the course for most of Edgar Allan Poe's characters. So we will read through this now. We'll start right back at the beginning, and then we'll pause as we go through just to make sure we're all on the same page. So again, this is The Cask of Amontillado by Edgar Allan Poe. Amontillado being a very delicious, very rare, very expensive Italian wine. The thousand injuries of Fortunato I had borne as best I could, but when he ventured upon insult, I vowed revenge. You, who so well know the nature of my soul, will not suppose, however, that I gave utterance to a threat. At length I would be avenged. This was a point definitively settled, but the very definitiveness with which it was resolved precluded the idea of risk. I must not only punish, but punish with impunity. A wrong is unredressed when retribution overtakes its redresser. It is equally unredressed when the avenger fails to make himself felt as such to him who has done the wrong. It must be understood that neither by word nor deed had I given Fortunato cause to doubt my good will. I continued, as was my wont, to smile in his face, and he did not perceive that my smile now was at the thought of his immolation. So that's where we were yesterday, starting with something new. He had a weak point, this Fortunato, although in other regards he was a man to be respected and even feared. He prided himself on his connoisseurship of wine. Few Italians have the true virtuoso spirit. For the most part, their enthusiasm is adopted to suit the time and opportunity, to practice imposture upon the British and Austrian millionaires. In painting and gemmery, Fortunato, like his countrymen, was a quack, but in the matter of old wines, he was sincere. In this respect I did not differ from him materially. I was skillful in the Italian vintages myself, and bought largely whenever I could. Okay, so let's pause right here. So the narrator is continuing to talk about Fortunato, and he mentions that Fortunato's biggest weakness is wine. So he not only drinks a lot of it, that's like one way that he's weak in it, but he also, Fortunato prides himself on knowing wine, on being the most wise when it comes to choosing the best wines. Now, the narrator is also pretty good at knowing what wine is good and what wine is not. But he says that Fortunato, he thinks that he's better than he actually is, so he's prideful when it comes to that wine. So when it says in painting and gemmery, so when it comes to like art or jewels, Fortunato didn't know anything. But when it comes to wine, Fortunato actually knows quite a bit. It was about dusk one evening during the supreme madness of the carnival season that I encountered my friend. He accosted me with excessive warmth, for he had been drinking much. The man wore motley. He had on a tight-fitting party-striped dress, and his head was surmounted by the conical cap and bells. I was so pleased to see him that I thought I should never have done wringing his hand. So, as we talked about yesterday, it's carnival, and so people dress up in these crazy costumes. So what is Fortunato's costume? Well, he looks like a circus clown. So he's wearing this really like gaudy striped suit. He's got bells coming off of his head. And so how does the narrator greet Fortunato? The guy that he's really mad at, the guy that he is planning to kill because he insulted him. How does the narrator greet Fortunato? He goes up to him, shakes his hand, and he's just, I didn't think that I could ever stop shaking his hand. I said to him, "My dear Fortunato, you are luckily met. How remarkably well you are looking today. But I have received a pipe of what passes for Amontillado, and I have my doubts." "How?" said he. "Amontillado? A pipe? Impossible! And in the middle of carnival." "I have my doubts," I replied, "and I was silly enough to pay the full Amontillado price without consulting you in the matter. You were not to be found, and I was fearful of losing a bargain." "Amontillado?" "I have my doubts." "Amontillado?" "And I must satisfy them." "Amontillado!" "As you are engaged, I am on my way to Lucchesi. If anyone has a critical turn, it is he. He will tell me." "Ah, Lucchesi cannot tell Amontillado from sherry." "And yet some fools will have it that his taste is a match for your own." "Come, let us go." "Whither?" "To your vaults." "My friend, no, I will not impose upon your good nature. I perceive you have an engagement. Lucchesi—" "I have no engagement. Come." "My friend, no, it is not the engagement, but the severe cold with which I perceive you are afflicted. The vaults are insufferably damp. They are encrusted with nitre." "Let us go, nevertheless. The cold is merely nothing. Amontillado. You have been imposed upon. And as for Lucchesi, he cannot distinguish sherry from Amontillado." Okay, let's pause here. So we know that Montresor wants to commit revenge upon Fortunato, right? And he also wants to get away with it. He doesn't want to get caught. So he's trying to lure Fortunato into the catacombs beneath his house where he knows that they will be alone. And how is he doing it? He's kind of taunting Fortunato. He's saying, "Oh yeah, I bought some Amontillado," which he knows Fortunato will really enjoy. But then he says, "Oh no, you're busy. I see that you're busy. Like I'll just go talk to your rival because I know that he knows wine." No. He doesn't know anything. I know about wine." But you also got a cold. I don't want you to go. I don't want you to get sick." "No, that's nothing. I want to see the Amontillado." So, what is Montresor doing? He is he's faking kindness, and he's just using Fortunato's pride to get him to come down into the vaults with him alone. So what is this whole page about? What is Montresor trying to do? He's just trying to manipulate Fortunato with his pride, with his seeming kindness to come down into the vaults alone with him. Thus speaking, Fortunato possessed himself of my own, putting on a mask of black silk and drawing a lauqueur, closely about my person, I suffered him to hurry me to my palazzo. There were no attendants at home. They had absconded, or left, to make merry in honor of the time. I had told them that I should not return until the morning, and had given them explicit orders not to stir from the house. These orders were sufficient, I well knew, to ensure their immediate disappearance, one and all, as soon as my back was turned. So, that whole paragraph right there, it's pretty funny, because how would you describe the tone of the narrator here? How would I describe him? Very sarcastic, because he's saying, you know, I told my attendants that I'm not going to be here tonight, but you can't leave. You have to stay in our house, but I'm not going to be here. And he knows that as soon as he leaves, the servants are going to leave too, because, you know, no one's going to stick around during a party if they know their master isn't going to be there. So he's just being sarcastic. I took from their sconces 2 flambeaux, or torches, and giving one to Fortunato, bowed him through several suites of rooms to the archway that led into the vaults. I passed down a long and winding staircase, requesting him to be cautious as he followed. He came at length to the foot of the descent, and stood together in the damp ground of the catacombs of the Montressors. The gait of my friend was unsteady, and the bells upon his cap jingled as he strode. Why is his gait unsteady, or his walk? Why is he walking unsteadily? Because he's already drunk. The pipe, said he. It is farther on, said I. But observe the white webwork which gleams from these cavern walls. He turned toward me, and looked into my eyes with 2 filmy orbs that distilled the rheum of intoxication. So, he's drunk. Nitre, he asked at length. Nitre, I replied. How long have you had that cough? My poor friend found it impossible to reply for many minutes. So I paused there. So they're going down into the vaults, and what do we know about Fortunato? Not only is he drunk, but he also has a cold. And so this thing that keeps getting mentioned, nitre, is like a crystalline kind of formation that forms on walls, and breathing it in is really kind of terrible for you. So it would make Fortunato's sickness even worse. So that's when they say nitre, that's just like kind of a rock crystal that grows on the walls of damp, cold places. My poor friend found it impossible to reply for many minutes. It is nothing, he said at last. Come, I said with a decision. We will go back. Your health is precious. You are rich, respected, admired, beloved. You are happy, as once I was. You are a man to be missed. For me it is no matter. We will go back. You will be ill, and I cannot be responsible. Besides, there is Lucchesi. Enough, he said. The cough is a mere nothing. It will not kill me. I shall not die of a cough. True, I replied. And indeed, I had no intention of alarming you unnecessarily, but you should use all proper caution. A draught of this Medoc will defend us from the damps. So again, what's he doing here? Just like our narrator did at the beginning, he's buttering him up. He's kind of sucking up to him to keep him going down into the crypts. Your health is precious. You're rich, respected, admired, beloved. You're happy. I can't have you risking your health down here. Even though what's the narrator trying to do? He's trying to kill him. And then he brings up Lucchesi again. Lucchesi. There's Lucchesi. I can just go get him. Knowing that Fortunato's pride will not make that possible. So then he says, a draught of this Medoc will defend us from the damps. That's just wine. So they're getting even more drunk. Here I knocked off the neck of a bottle, which I drew from a long row of its fellows that lay upon the mould. Drink, I said, presenting him the wine. He raised it to his lips with a leer. He paused and nodded to me familiarly, while his bells jingled. "I drink," he said, "to the buried that repose around us." "And I to your long life." He again took my arm, and we proceeded. "These vaults," he said, "are extensive." "The Montresors," I replied, "were a great and numerous family." "I forget your arms." Arms being like a coat of arms. Old. Here, let me pull it up. Pause. Okay, so Montresor mentions a coat of arms, or Fortunato mentions arms. And so back in the Middle Ages, then families would be represented by a coat of arms, which was basically just a series of symbols with maybe some words on it, and it would be flown on a flag, and it represented your family. And so these are some common examples. So here is a picture of Montresors, and this will be explained in just a moment, but you can visualize it. "I forget your arms." A huge human foot door. In a field azure, the foot crushes a serpent rampant, whose fangs are embedded in the heel. "And the motto?" "Nemo me impune lacessit." "Good," he said. Nemo me impune lacessit, being Latin for no one harasses me with impunity. Maybe a little bit of foreshadowing. Nobody harasses me or insults me and gets away with it. "Good," he said. The wine sparkled in his eyes and the bells jingled. My own fancy grew warm with the Medoc. We had passed through walls of piled bones, with casks and puncheons intermingling, into the inmost recesses of the catacombs. I paused again, and this time I made bold to seize Fortunato by an arm above the elbow. "The niter," I said. "See, it increases. It hangs like moss upon the vaults. We are below the river's bed. The drops of moisture trickle among the bones." "Come, we will go back ere it is too late. Your cough." "It is nothing," he said. "Let us go on. But first, another draught of the Medoc." I broke and reached him a flagon of de Grave wine. He emptied it at a breath. His eyes flashed with a fierce light. He laughed and drew the bottle upward with a gesticulation I did not understand. I looked at him in surprise. He repeated the movement, a grotesque one. "You do not comprehend?" he said. "Not I," I replied. "Then you are not of the Brotherhood." "How?" "You are not of the Masons." Yes, I said. Yes. "You impossible, a Mason?" "A Mason," I replied. "A sign," he said. "It is this," I answered, producing a trowel from beneath the folds of my roquelaire. "You jest," he exclaimed, recoiling a few paces. "But let us proceed to the Amontillado." So, hang on, my lights just turned off. So what happened here is they're drinking the wine, and Fortunato just starts making this weird like symbol out of his hands, and the narrator's like, "What are you doing?" And then it's revealed that Fortunato is a Freemason. He's a part of that brotherhood. So then there's a little bit of wordplay. Fortunato says, "Oh, you must not be a Mason then," meaning Freemason. But our narrator Montresor says, "Oh yeah, but I am a Mason." And he pulls out of his folds a trowel, or a tool for laying brick. So a little bit of wordplay there, basically saying, "Oh, you're not a Mason, Freemason." "Well, I am a Mason, normal Mason." And then that's why Fortunato says, "Oh, you jest," because they're just being funny. "All right, be it so," I said, replacing the tool beneath the cloak. and again offering him my arm. He leaned upon it heavily. We continued our route in search of the Amontillado. We passed through a range of low arches, descended, passed on, and descending again, arrived at a deep crypt in which the foulness of the air caused our flambeau rather to glow than to flame. At the most remote end of the crypt there appeared another, less spacious. Its walls had been lined with human remains, piled to the vault overhead in the fashion of the great catacombs of Paris. 3 sides of this interior crypt were still ornamented in this manner. From the 4th, the bones had been thrown down and lay promiscuously upon the earth, forming at one point a mound of some size. Within the wall thus exposed by the displacing of the bones, we perceived a still interior recess, in depth about 4 feet, in width 3, and height 6 or 7. It seemed to have been constructed for no special use within itself, but formed merely the interval between 2 of the colossal supports of the roof in the catacombs, and was backed by one of the circumscribing walls of solid granite. Okay, so they are going down through the crypts, and they get to the end. They're at the very bottom of the catacombs, and so the whole, like, this paragraph is just describing a spot in the wall between 2 pillars where it goes back a few feet, just between these 2 pillars. So if you want to imagine it, it's like here's the crypt on either side, and then back there would just be like a spot between the columns supporting the ceiling. So that's all he's describing. It was in vain that Fortunato, uplifting his dull torch, endeavored to pry into the depth of the recess. Its termination the feeble light did not enable us to see. "Well, proceed," I said. "Herein is the Amontillado. As for Lucchesi—" Bring that up again. "He is an ignoramus," interrupted my friend, as he stepped unsteadily forward, while I followed immediately at his heels. In an instant he had reached the extremity of the niche, and finding his progress arrested by the rock, stood stupidly bewildered. A moment more and I had fettered him to the granite. In its surface were 2 iron staples, distant from each other about 2 feet horizontally. From one of these depended a short chain, from the other a padlock. Throwing the links about his waist, it was but the work of a few seconds to secure it. He was much too astounded to resist. Withdrawing the key, I stepped back from the recess. So what did he do to Fortunato? So Fortunato steps into the little, like, recess, into the place in the rock, and his head bumps into the wall, so he's like, "What? I thought you said the Amontillado is here." So he's just standing there, and he's drunk, and he's just trying to figure out what's going on. And while he's standing there, Montresor comes behind him, takes a chain that was on the wall right behind Fortunato, wraps it around his waist, locks the chain, and then steps back. So Fortunato is trapped in this little crypt, locked there by Montresor. "Pass your hand," I said, "over the wall. You cannot help feeling the nitre. Indeed, it is very damp. Once more, let me implore you to return. No? Then I must positively leave you. But I must first render you all the little attentions in my power." So now, this narrator, he's gone full psychopath. He's locked Fortunato against the wall. He's chained him up, and now he's saying, "Oh, come on. It's so damp down here. Let's go. Come on, let's leave. Oh, you don't want to? Well, then I guess I have to leave." The Amontillado!" ejaculated my friend, not yet recovered from his astonishment. "True," I replied. "The Amontillado!" As I said these words, I busied myself among the pile of bones of which I have before spoken. Throwing them aside, I soon uncovered a quantity of building stone and mortar. With these materials, and with the aid of my trowel, or that little tool, I began vigorously to wall up the entrance of the niche. I had scarcely laid the first tier of the masonry when I discovered that the intoxication of Fortunato had in a great measure worn off. The earliest indication I had of this was a low moaning cry from the depth of the recess. It was not the cry of a drunken man. There was then a long and obstinate silence. I laid the second tier, and the third, and the fourth. And then I heard the furious vibrations of the chain. The noise lasted for several minutes, during which, that I might hearken to it with the more satisfaction, I ceased my labors and sat down upon the bones. When at last the clanking subsided, I resumed the trowel and finished without interruption the fifth, the sixth, and the seventh tier. The wall was nearly upon a level with my breast. I again paused, and holding the flambeau over the masonwork, threw a few feeble rays upon the figure within. So what's he doing to Fortunato? So he not only chained him to the wall, filled with niter, and he's already sick, but now he's literally sealing him brick by brick inside of this part of the wall. And so as he's doing this, Fortunato first starts moaning, and then he just starts shaking in his chain, trying desperately to escape. And Montrezor just sits back, and he just sits down and he just listens. And then once the shaking of the chain stops, he just gets back and keeps working. A succession of loud and shrill screams, bursting suddenly from the throat of the chained form, seemed to thrust me violently back. For a brief moment I hesitated. I trembled. Unsheathing my rapier, I began to grope with it about the recess, but the thought of an instant reassured me. I placed my hand upon the solid fabric of the catacombs and felt satisfied. I reapproached the wall. I replied to the yells of him who clamored. I re-echoed. I aided. I surpassed them in volume and in strength. I did this, and the clamorer grew still. It was now midnight, and my task was drawing to a close. I had completed the 8th, the 9th, and the 10th tier. I had finished a portion of the last and the 11th. There remained but a single stone to be fitted and plastered in. I struggled with its weight. I placed it partially in its destined position. But now there came from out the niche a low laugh that erected the hairs upon my head. It was succeeded by a sad voice, with which I had difficulty in recognizing as that of the noble Fortunato. The voice said, a very good joke indeed, an excellent jest. We will have many a rich laugh about it at the palazzo, over our wine. The Amontillado, I said. Yes, the Amontillado. But it is not getting late. Will not they be awaiting us at the palazzo, the Lady Fortunato and the rest? Let us be gone. Yes, I said, let us be gone. For the love of God, Montrezor! Yes, I said, for the love of God. But to these words I hearkened in vain for a reply. I grew impatient. I called aloud, Fortunato! No answer. I called again. Fortunato! No answer still. I thrust a torch through the remaining aperture and let it fall within. There came forth in reply only a jingling of the bells. My heart grew sick, on account of the dampness of the catacombs. I hastened to make an end of my labor. I forced the last stone into its position. I plastered it up. Against the new masonry, I re-erected the old rampart of bones. For the half of a century, no mortal has disturbed them. In pace requiescat. So, what happened at the end of that story there? Montrezor, after locking up Fortunato, after starting to seal him in, Fortunato just has basically a mental breakdown. He starts laughing. He starts saying, oh, this is going to be a great joke. Like, come on, man. Like, hey, let me out. We're going to laugh at this a lot. This is going to be a great story. And then Montrezor just keeps taunting him, for the love of God. And then Fortunato just stops talking. So then Montrezor is like, hey, Fortunato. No answer. So he drops the torch in the aperture, seals it up, and that's it. So 50 years later, The narrator is telling this story, and that's the Cask of Amontillado. So there's a lot of questions that have to do with this story, and we will discuss them in class tomorrow. But in any case, I hope that you enjoyed the story, and we will discuss this in class tomorrow. So be ready for that.